After the events on Wednesday, I can see why a lot of people have turned up today. What I want to do now, I want to introduce the only politician that went down to pay any respects to Lee Rigby. He's our chairman of the party and he's our MEP. It's Nick Griffin.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for coming. It's a beautiful day out there, as you know, so really we'd all rather be in the garden or whatever, I reckon. But at the same time, as you know, there's really important things happening in this country now. For decades, most British people, most ordinary, normal, decent people, have watched in utter despair as the political elite have ruined this country, thing by thing. You can go down streets all over this country, you don't recognise it anymore. You turn the television on, you don't recognise it anymore. We're strangers in our own land in 101 different ways. And for years, people have sat and moaned about it and done nothing about it. And what happened on Wednesday, I think, could be the trigger that suddenly makes people decide, right, I'm going to do something about it. So, I'm not here to talk about what happened on Wednesday. You all know it. You've all seen it on television. You've all read the papers, you've all talked about it. It's horrific. I think in many ways it shocked the British people more than 7/7. Because the bombings that happened that day, still bombing, it's impersonal, isn't it? And it's sort of professional in a weird, sick sort of way. Whereas what happened on Wednesday was directly personal and it can happen again and again and again. And really, how can it be stopped? If people are importing guns or explosives, there's a chance the police can catch them. But they're just going to pick up a knife. There's no chance of catching them. So I think it's really shaken people. So brutal what's been done just the other day to Lee Rigby. And what's been done in a way to all the people of this country. Because now absolutely everyone knows that nobody is safe anymore. Could happen anywhere to anybody. That was a soldier. There's a particular reason for radical Islamists attacking soldiers. But time after time after time, night after night after night, when some of the slightly less radicalised ones, but the ones who still hate us, still hate our way of doing things, they go out on a Friday night and they attack a young white lad just because he's white. Or they try and groom a young girl just because she's English or just because she's Sikh or West Indian, just because she's not one of them. Everybody is potentially a target for what is it's a murderous level of violence. So the question is not what happened, it's why it happened and what we're going to do to stop it. So first of all, the whys. Well, at one level, it's because of radical Islam. And all the political elite, everybody, every other politician in the country, everyone in the mass media saying it's just radical Islam, it's just the extremists. No, it is not. The whole of Sunni Islam is fundamentally extreme. It's a way of conquering other people's countries. It has been from the very beginning. It's a 7th century desert religion which hasn't reformed, and it cannot reform, because any attempt to reform it is regarded as apostasy, as heresy, and it's punishable by death. And that's why it hasn't reformed itself. Christianity used to have some pretty brutal angles to it. If Christians still burnt little old ladies for speaking to their cats, I would be against Christianity having a foothold in Britain. But it doesn't. It reformed, it changed, it softened. And it became, in fact, the very foundation stone of all our freedoms, all our liberties. Everything we hold dear is based on that westernised, modernised Christianity. But Islam, Sunni Islam in particular, hasn't modernised, cannot modernise, never will modernise. And individually, some of those are perfectly very nice people. This party absolutely says, even for what happened on Wednesday, we do not blame ordinary Muslims. There'll be lads going out tonight, attacking shops, attacking people in the streets just because they're brown. Sometimes they'll be attacking Sikhs and Hindus, particularly unjust. Sometimes they'll be attacking ordinary Muslims who don't deserve it. You can't blame them for coming to this country to try to get a better life for their kids. The people to blame are the politicians who let those people in such huge numbers. And now they're telling us, oh, it's only radical Islam, so if we just take out the radicals, all the rest will get on. They're all having joint religious services and so on, and isn't it wonderful? We're all pulling together, apparently. Baroness Wazi, the Tory party expenses crook, is saying the great thing about Woolwich is that it's past and we haven't turned against each other. Everyone's come together. Baroness Wazi, of course, lives in a fantasy world whereby claiming expenses to which she's not entitled is absolutely all right. But I'll tell you this, when Baroness Wazi says, it's tremendous because people haven't turned on each other over this, isn't it wonderful? She's speaking too soon. Without a shadow of a doubt, this country is one huge tinderbox just waiting to go off. I don't know how many of you have seen what's happening in Sweden. Out of interest, to show the depth of media control, put your hands up if you know what's happened in Sweden with the riots the last few days. It's about 2/3. This is a very experienced audience, quite some people, but some are new as well. But I think actually what's happened is, let's ask another question. How many of you have seen it on the internet, what happened in Sweden? And how many of you have seen it in the mainstream media? Ah, that's it. So what's going on here is a few years ago, none of us would know that for the last 5 nights, Stockholm and now 3 or 4 other major cities in Sweden have been torn apart by Muslim rioters. Whole blocks burnt to the ground. Hundreds upon hundreds of cars burnt. Fire engines attacked. It's absolute mayhem. And our controlled mass media are not letting us know a word about it because they're trying to con people into thinking, yes, this is Islamic extremism, it's terrible, but it's just these crazy fanatics and they're not like the rest of them. And what's happening in Sweden, when every single Muslim immigrant community is tearing its place apart and attacking the Swedes who've taken them in and given them a succor, that shows, well, actually, it shows 2 things. It shows it's not just a small number of them, and it shows what's going to happen in this country as well, sooner rather than later, I believe. So it's not just Islam, it's not just the extremists, it's the whole thing. Because you can have groups of immigrants into this country, say like the Poles. We're against having any significant numbers of immigrants in this country now because we're full, we haven't got enough jobs to go around, we haven't got enough houses to go around. So the huge numbers of East Europeans who come and are still coming should not be here. If we were out of the European Union, like this party has stood for since it was founded in 1982, they wouldn't be here, they'd be home, and we would have the jobs and the houses. But those people, for all that we don't want them here in those large numbers, if they stayed for several generations, they would assimilate. This party's got Polish members. People whose parents or grandparents came here during the Second World War, fought for this country, worked for this country, went in the mills, down the pits after the Second World War when there was a labour shortage, and they fitted in, they made sure their kids learned English, they didn't hold their hands out, they didn't expect translators in the doctor's surgery or in the police station if they got nicked, they got on and effectively they became British because they could, because they were European like us, and because they were Christian like us, they could merge in. That was possible. The huge numbers now, it's not possible. But at least those people only want to take our jobs and our houses. The Muslims want to take our country and turn it into an Islamic Republic. That's the difference. And that's why they're a particularly huge problem. But we've just seen, because the 2, allegedly, who murdered Lee Rigby, they weren't Muslims, they're not Pakistanis, they're not the Muslims that we know and love in the Northwest. No. What's this cynicism? Dear, oh dear. It's a serious subject. They're not like that. One of them was a Christian African. Both of them Africans. Both of them have turned to Islam. And here's another problem with Islam, that yes, it's a religious and a political faith, but it's also for the third world, increasingly, for people from the third world, it's a way of hitting back at our society. It's a way, if they were any other religion, anything else, they might come here and they may either work hard and settle down, or they may steal and rob, but they'll just do it for themselves. But Islam gives them a goal, and their goal is to turn every society in the world into an Islamic Republic. And they intend to do it in this country, and we intend to, and we are going to stop them. But the way in which the 2 films murdering Lee Rigby the other day turned from being just any kind of immigrants into being Muslim fanatics highlights the fact that fundamentally this isn't a problem of Islam. Fundamentally, this is a problem of immigration. Because if our ruling elite hadn't set about an utterly insane, disgusting, deadly, dangerous utopian scheme to turn our country from poor, benighted, unenriched white Britain into an enriched, multicultural, diverse wonder of the world, this couldn't have happened. But it was always going to happen. When Enoch Powell said in 1968 that we must be mad, literally mad, it's like watching a nation build up its own funeral pyre. And when he talked in terms that became known in the newspapers of rivers of blood, he was a wise man, not least because he'd served in India. He knew what the third world was like. He knew what mass immigration would bring. He didn't specifically know it might be Islam, but one way or the other, it was always going to be happening. Because certainly if you go down to huge parts of East London, as an example, huge parts of Birmingham, the injustice and the wrong that's been done to the native people, our people, hasn't been done by Muslims. It's been done by our ruling establishment and the people who've taken over whole areas. Very often, the whole of Barking and Dagenham has been swamped in the last 10 years. The Labour Party deliberately, it's now come out yet again through Peter Mandelson, the Labour Party deliberately set about bringing in 3 million immigrants secure in the knowledge that they would vote Labour. And taking Barking and Dagenham, which I've known since I was a lad, since I was first involved in this movement at the age of 15, which is quite a long time ago, ladies. Not that long, but quite a long time ago. When I was first involved there, Barking and Dagenham was a wonderful place. It was a genuinely vibrant working class community. And that wasn't from a sort of some cranky leftist sort of silly way of looking at it. It was real life. You could go into pubs in Barking and Dagenham on a Friday or a Saturday night 30, 40 years ago, and people were singing, drinking and singing, and there was a buzz, and it was lively, and everybody looked after each other. And yes, they were dirt poor, and yes, it was pretty rough, but it really was a wonderful community. And they went and they wrecked that, and they didn't wreck it with Muslims. And people like the EDL say, oh, we get rid of the extreme Muslims, everything will be fine. You get rid of every Muslim in this country, it wouldn't help the people of Barking and Dagenham, the ones who haven't fled, because the people who've transformed Barking and Dagenham are all African Christians. And I don't give a damn what they are. They should not be there because they were brought in to defraud the British people of our right to vote for our future, and they need to go, and the Labour Party crooks who brought them in need to go to prison. And then there's another problem. Having brought in these massive immigrants, and at the core of them, this Islam, which is absolutely incompatible with our way of doing things, and which attracts every single immigrant who isn't happy with our way of doing things. Having brought that in, having created this massive instability in our poor country, the same ruling elite that did that with the deliberate intention of so mixing us up, of so destroying our community identity that we couldn't effectively resist their frauds and their theft and their grand European project and their intention to privatise absolutely every single asset in this country. Every council house, every school, every hospital, every library, every prison, and give the money from those privatisations to their own cronies, to the people who finance those parties, because that's what's going on in this country. Before they set about doing that, they decided they would so destroy us through mass immigration that we no longer had the common sense of identity, the common sense of justice and injustice, and an ability to fight the ruling elite when they ripped us off, because we'd be too busy fighting each other. And that's the key reason that they set about transforming, destroying our country in the first place. And having done that, the final disaster, the final thing that led, whatever they say it didn't, directly to Lee Rigby's murder, and will lead to more murders over the months and the years to come. They've involved us in foreign wars that have nothing to do with the people of this country, but which wind up huge sections of the immigrant community they brought in. It's madness. It's absolute madness what they've done, and it's getting worse. And if you look at, for instance, the way that papers like the Daily Express and the Daily Star are now promoting the English Defence League. I've got a lot of time for the ordinary lads in the English Defence League. It's tremendous to see young men and young women as well standing up on the streets saying, if necessary, we'll fight for our rights and the rights of our people. At long bloody last, the British in general and the English in particular are actually standing up. That's a really good thing. A lot of time for that. But the people running the English Defence League, the people promoting the English Defence League in papers like the Express and the Star, they want something like a race war on the streets of this country. They want to see poor whites and Muslims, Pakistanis, whatever, fighting and all the rest of it, because fundamentally their agenda is to involve us in wars in the Middle East to fight for several different interest groups. The American government, or more to the point, the American military-industrial complex. People like Halliburton, a company who make billions and billions and billions of dollars every time America and Britain go into war in somewhere like Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran. They make huge amounts of money on it. So they want war. And there's a man called Frank Gaffney, who's a gopher for Cheney and Bush. And if you look at what he's doing, he's backing and pushing groups like the Henry Jackson Society, which is a sort of conservative think tank. And if you look in the serious papers, the Telegraph, the Times and so on, you'll see people from the Henry Jackson Society arguing that what went on in Greenwich, in Woolwich, it's actually something which is part of a big global struggle, and this is why we have to go in and send our troops in to democratise the Middle East. So they're pushing at that level. And Frank Gaffney is helping to fund that line. And Frank Gaffney is also, through the Centre for Vigilant Freedom, helping to fund and push and direct the English Defence League. It's two different parts of the same attack, and one way or another, it's to use us and to use our people's understandable disgust and loathing and revulsion and fear of what goes on in places like Woolwich to herd us all like sheep into a war on their behalf, a war where they make profit, where the American military-industrial complex like Halliburton, like Boeing and so on, make an enormous amount of money. So they're pushing us to war. Who else is pushing us to war? The Zionist elite is pushing us to war. I'm not saying all Jews. Absolutely not. The Jews, just as most Muslims, are in fact the victims of their faith and their imams and so on, and are herded one way, so too the Jews. But the Zionist elite of Jewry has, for a long, long time, focused only on its own interests, or what they think are its own interests. And they don't want Israelis to fight for Israel. Why should they? If the Americans will fight for Israel, if the British will fight for Israel. And constantly they try and drag us into these wars. So they're a problem, especially when people like Mr. Desmond, the owner of the Daily Express, is absolutely in bed with them. He's one of them. So he's using his media power to drag us into his people's war, even though it's not in our interests. Another group, heavily pushing with enormous power because they got enormous money. President Bush, as was in the United States, and Blair and all the rest of them, they get vast amounts of money from the Saudi Arabians. And the Saudi Arabians, they're actually the people funding the most extreme mosques in Britain. And David Cameron saying, oh, we've got to fight terror, and that's why he's sending people into Syria. And you know who we're helping in Syria? People like the murderers of Lee Rigby. Those are the people. Syria was run by a fairly stable, nationalistic, sort of socialist state, which might not have been particularly nice to live under, but it kept the different peoples of Syria calm and peaceful, and it was building a modern state. And when Cameron is using vast amounts of your money to interfere in Syria and try to destroy President Assad, the people who will take over will be radical Muslim extremists funded by the Saudi Arabians. But that's okay, because the Saudi Arabians also fund all the Western political parties in government, not ours, and never will. So they're pushing for war as well. All these different groups pushing to use our money and our young boys and now our young girls to fight their bloody wars for them. And everyone out there is in favour of that and says, yes, we've got to do it and we mustn't surrender to terrorism. We say we mustn't surrender to terrorism either, but neither we must get involved in wars which they hand young Muslims to the terrorist trainers, to the terrorist recruiters, absolutely on a plate. And if they were good wars, fair enough, we'd go and fight them. If the Argentines try and take the Falkland Islands, the British National Party would be the first to say, fight them, fight them, fight them and take them back, because the Falklands are British. They're our people, and that's a war that we should be involved in, if we have to be. But what the hell are we doing in Afghanistan? And they told us various different tales. We're there to stop the Taliban. We're there to make sure that their women don't have to dress up in black sacks. We're there to make sure that their girls can go to school. What the hell is that worth the blood of one British soldier for? If you're worried about women wearing burqas, then ban them in Britain and leave the Afghans to sort their own problems out. But you mark my words, between them, these various corrupt elite groups, they will keep on dragging us into war. They will use attacks like on Lee Rigby to say, well, this shows why we've got to go over there to fight this terrorism, because otherwise we'll get more in Britain. When in fact, it's the very fact that we are over there, the fact that we're involved over there in places where we have no right or need or duty to be, that's the thing that's causing the trouble, a lot of the trouble, in the first place. So, it's going to get worse, that, because they want us in there. They want the trouble on the streets. We don't. We're accused of being extreme. I look at what's happened to London, Birmingham, Preston, Blackburn, and I think, how could anything be more extreme than what they've done to our country? I look at the fact there's a war memorial in virtually every single village and town in this country, with written up there name after name after name of brave young men who went out there to fight for British freedom and independence. And then I think, because I see it, we now live as a vassal state of the European Union, where 85% of our laws are made not even by MEPs, but by unelected bureaucrats. I look at the way they've transformed our country and given our freedoms away, and I think that's bloody extreme. And all we're doing is saying, no, that shouldn't have happened, especially with no democratic mandate. Let's basically put those things back to where they were before this extreme political elite started ballsing our country up on such a huge scale. They're the extremists, not us. Which leads us to the next point then. What next? Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen next. I don't know whether it's going to happen this weekend, next weekend, 6 months' time, 2 years down the line, but I tell you, it's going to happen. It's somewhere in one of the edges of one of their ghettos, somewhere in this poor, ruined country of ours. Something quite minor is going to happen. It might be a minor road traffic accident. It might be someone getting a parking ticket. It might be a drugs bust. It could well be an argument between a couple of their lads. No, it won't be a couple of their lads. Between a gang of their lads and two of ours, because that's the way they do those things. Something will happen which will start throwing stones. And within a couple of hours, they'll be throwing petrol bombs. And by the evening, because our useless police will sit there and say, what should we do now? Because they don't know what to do anymore unless they're told. And they won't be told to go in and get tough with a Muslim population, because they're terrified of the fact there's far more of their young men will come out on the streets. The police are terrified of the fact that in almost any town in the northwest of England, the Muslims, through their taxi ranks, can organise a larger mob of people more tooled up than the police are. So they'll do everything they can to avoid it. And by the time they realise what's happening, they will be murdering their English neighbours in the street. And then the English will have a go back. And we'll get the blame for that, when we're the ones who constantly, as I say, from Powell onwards, have constantly said this would end in the most terrible bloodshed. And when it kicks off, it'll happen in one small town, it'll spread, and within 3 or 4 nights, town after town after town in this poor country of ours is going to be on fire. Cars, lorries, buses, houses, shops, people are going to be on fire, as our two communities, who, let's face it, didn't really get along to start with, who now hate and detest each other, go to war against each other. And when that happened in Northern Ireland, in Belfast in 1968, it took 10,000 British soldiers to keep apart the two warring populations in a town about the size of Preston. The British Army hasn't got enough soldiers to keep Birmingham under control, to keep Bradford under control, to keep London under control, let alone to keep everywhere under control when it all goes off at the same time. And I'll tell you, that's that far away from happening, and everybody knows it, except perhaps Baroness Warzy, who says, oh, we're so lucky, we've all pulled together, and it's tremendous, and now we can basically forget about what happened in Woolwich and just carry on with doing what we were doing. No, they bloody cannot, because it is going to explode on a terrifying, terrifying scale. How can it be avoided? I don't believe it can be avoided now. It's going to happen, and then after a few weeks it'll die down. And the country will never be the same again, and 3 months later it'll happen again, or the next summer it'll happen again. Worse and worse, it'll go on forever. And the young boys growing up to young men under those circumstances will be so much harder, so much more radicalised, so much more full of hate on both sides of the community, that it'll happen again and again, more and more and more, getting worse and worse as their numbers grow, because they are breeding at a far, far greater rate than ours. So I'm not saying this is going to happen because I want to see it happen. I do not, because if it happens, our people are the ones who suffer, because we're softer, we're gentler, we're more law-abiding, and because the police will come down on our lads and leave theirs to do what they bloody well like most of the time. So I'm not looking forward to this. It's going to be a disaster which will lay this country waste. But it's going to happen. So what's the answer? There's only one answer. It's not to complain about radical clerics, although we are going to be over this year, over this summer, we're going to be running a huge campaign, hate preachers out, because that's what the British public get. And the utter failure of the British political elite to do anything about people like Anjem Choudhury is the thing that annoys people more than anything else. So we're going to be going for that. But our long-term answer is far more radical and actually far more peaceful. It's quite simple. When you've got two people who absolutely cannot get on, a husband and wife, who are now at daggers drawn and are fighting, then everybody, except perhaps the very most radical fringe of the Catholic Church in Britain, everyone recognises when it gets that bad, then rather than stabbing each other when one's asleep, it's better to have a divorce. There's life. It's messy, it's awkward, it's bloody expensive because of the lawyers, but it's better, and then people can go on and get on with their own lives again. And we have to have a divorce, not just with the radical Muslims, but with all the Muslims. Because you can't tell, because every time one of these radicals goes and blows himself up or kills someone, they all come along and say how wonderful he was 6 months ago, how nice he was 6 months ago, how he was involved in various community programmes, in other words, getting British taxpayers' money to do various things. Sadiq Khan, who organised the 7/7 bombings, he'd been toddling off to the House of Commons because he was a model pillar of his community. And 6 months later, he's blowing himself up on the London transport system. So all of them have to go. But like I say, divorces are very messy. The whole process of mass immigration has to go into reverse. They're very expensive. Fortunately, we can afford it. This country can afford it. I know that because David Cameron, God bless him, has ring-fenced £12 billion a year for foreign aid. They can cut hospitals, they can cut schools, they can flog off the transport system, they can flog off the post office, they can do everything, but Britain can definitely afford £12 billion a year in foreign aid. Not million, billion. £12 billion in foreign aid. If we can afford £12 billion in foreign aid, we can afford to take every penny of that £12 billion of foreign aid and pay it to the countries and to the people involved in a huge resettlement programme whereby, first of all, the Muslim extremists and the radicals are thrown out without anything at all. They're lucky to get out with their bloody lives. But after that, as gently and as kindly and as decently as possible, and it will be gentle and kind and decent because the British people are gentle and kind and decent, the others have to leave as well. Because if not, they and their children will be fighting us and our children and their children forever and ever and ever until their numbers are such that they simply take over the country. And I tell you, if that happens, you look at places like Egypt, at places like Somalia, and you can see that they will not then be kind and gentle and decent to our grandchildren. It will be hell. It's a simple fact, and that is why we say that we have the absolute right, in fact the duty, not just to stop immigration, like everybody else promises before every election, Not just to stop it, but to reverse it on a massive scale and to pay for the nose to do so. One other bit of good news on that in terms of payment, there's another income stream we can use and will use for this, and that is that every politician, every newspaper magnate, every big business that has profited from mass immigration is going to be put on trial for what they did, and if they are found guilty, their assets, people like Tony Blair making millions now out of the treason for what he did to this country, making millions despite it now being openly admitted by his right-hand man, Peter Mandelson, openly admitted that they let in 3 million immigrants into our country just to rig the voting. Dame Shirley Porter did that under the Tories with 10 or 12 people in each ward in Westminster Council. And for that, she was convicted of gerrymandering and she was given a prison sentence. And if it wasn't for that fact she skipped to Israel, she would have served time in prison for trying to fiddle the British electoral system with 20 people in one little ward and 15 in another. Blair and Mandelson and Brown did it with 3 million people. So they should be in prison, and I'll tell you when they are, every single penny of the assets they've got through what they did is going to help undo the damage that they did, which will be a little bit of justice at last. Yeah. Godspeed the day. That's the long term. To do that, we have to be in power. It's going to take time, effort. But I tell you what, out there, the circumstances are right. All those sheep rushing to vote for UKIP because the mass media has told them that UKIP's tough on immigration. UKIP's tough on immigration is this. Their policy is that for every Brit who, this managed migration, balanced migration, for every Brit who leaves because they can't stand the taxes, feeling a foreigner in their own country, police who are only interested in persecuting motorists, taxes and the weather, those are the reasons people leave. They go to Spain, to France, to Australia, wherever they possibly can. For every Brit who leaves, UKIP will be happy to have them replaced by an immigrant. Not a Christian Pole, God forbid. Oh no. No, they've got to be black or brown. Ideally, they've got to be Muslim. So given that, roughly speaking, 250,000 Brits leave every year, UKIP's balanced migration policy will be another 250,000 of them coming into our country every year, plus another 50,000 who UKIP will only let in if they have work permits. Sounds great, doesn't it? If they have a definite right to come and take a job off a British worker, they can come in. What the hell's that about? They're the very ones who should be kept out because we've got millions and millions of our own people on the dole, on short time, working in jobs where the wages are lousy because there's so many workers chasing so few jobs because of mass immigration. So UKIP's anti-immigration policy is actually a 300,000 immigrants coming into this country every single year. And the day after that last election, Nigel Farage rushed off to The Guardian and said, yeah, slippery, slimy. Now I think we'll soften that policy. But the great thing is how many people voted for what they thought was a party which was anti-establishment, which was anti-immigration, which would stand up for the interests of the British people. And they've been conned, but at least they did it. At least they wanted to do it. And they're going to find out that UKIP won't deliver because it's a rich man's party. It's a boss's party. Of course it wants immigration. They won't deliver. We will be there and we will deliver. But before we can do that, we've got to get power. So where do we start? Where do we start? Well, if you're available next Saturday, come down with us to Woolwich, where we've announced a march. This party marched a lot in the past, hasn't marched for many years, but this is an issue because the public don't always get. Why are you marching? Are you just going to cause trouble? We're marching in Woolwich. We're marching from Woolwich to Lewisham for a very specific reason. Because one of the alleged killers, we have to say alleged, even though they were photographed covered in blood and so on, one of the alleged killers had a close association with the Lewisham Islamic Centre. And the Lewisham Islamic Centre has rushed to condemn the murder. Good, fine, excellent. But they're still advertising on their website not just the self-defence classes they have for their little Muslims, which is fair enough. All kids are entitled to learn self-defence. Kids need self-defence in Woolwich and Lewisham, I'll tell you that. It's a hellhole. but also the martial arts classes for the adults, for the Muslim brothers and the Muslim sisters. And they're rolling out a system of martial arts called Wing Chun, which is a form of Kung Fu, which, as well as being particularly vicious, also specialises in fighting with weapons, sticks and knives. And the knives that are used in that form of martial art are extremely similar to the ones in that appalling video footage of the murder of Lee Rigby. And on their website last night, advertising this thing still, the arrogance of these people, you could still see the knives on the wall. You've got an Islamic centre, something that the sheeple out there are told by the mass media, by the controlled mass media, is a place of worship and a place of peace for a religion of peace, and they're running martial arts classes and they've got knives on the wall of the same kind that were used to murder that poor young boy. And we're going to draw attention to that, to draw attention to the lie and the hypocrisy that, yes, it's all very peaceful, and when the radicals do these things, they're perverting Islam. No, they're not. When they behead the unbeliever, they're doing what the Quran tells them to do. And when they train for martial arts classes in their mosques, they're doing what the Quran tells them to do. And when they plan to take over our country and convert our unbelief and our all sorts of wickedness in their eyes into an Islamic Republic, they are doing what the Quran tells them to do. That's the simple reality of it. And we're holding that march to draw attention to that. It'll probably be banned. We'll still hold a demonstration. And the fact it's going on, almost certainly, a lot more people will understand why we're marching. So it'll help to wake the British people up to understand the full gravity of the situation and the fact that the political elite's answer, which is just going to be arrest a few extremists and throw vast amounts of money at their community. So they've got no gripes, no grudges, because they'll say, oh, it's because the poor dears are unemployed. Our boys are unemployed too. But they don't do things like that. But yeah, they will throw vast amounts of money at that community. Where are they going to get it from? Us. Exactly so. So we, with that march, with that protest, we will wake some more of the people up that much quicker to the reality that there's a lot more beyond what they're told by the controlled mass media. That's the start. Come along to that if you can. If you can't, then get active locally. We've got on the website, and Peter will have the leaflets, I'm sure, very shortly. We've got the new paper out. We've got leaflets about these subjects. We've got material, and 6 of our people were out in Newcastle for 2 hours yesterday. They gave out 6,000 leaflets, bang like that. Adam was saying the response was stunning. And that's not 6,000 leaflets. Here, take that. Oh, well, all right, if I may. That's, yes, fantastic, about time. Where have you been? Actually, we've been there all along. But they were too busy watching Coronation Street or football or whatever. But nevertheless, we've been there all along. We're here now, and we're going to be there bigger and bolder and even more effective in the future. You mark my words. And in particular, as I mentioned at the start when I was speaking earlier on, the thing we're going to centre this summer's activities on, until it all goes much worse, is the campaign Hate Preachers Out. And that's mainly going to be a petition campaign, either on the streets or door to door. And door to door is especially good because when you get someone to sign door to door, you can then sign them up for a postal vote. And that is the way we are going to win. The elite mass media are trying to say, oh, the BNP's got to march because it's given up on the ballot box. No, we haven't. We just discovered how to win in the ballot box with 41% of the vote in the Maryport ward where we rolled out our new system. It needs about 3 or 4 people, that's all. 3, in fact, for a district council seat, it needs 3 people for this party to be almost guaranteed a win next year. If you simply do the work and knock on about 100 doors a week and get 30 postal votes a week, we are going to win seats. We're committed to the ballot box. We're committed to the democratic process. It's part of what makes this country great. It's part of what makes our way of doing things so different to the Islamic way of doing things and to the ruling elite's way of doing things, where it's all about money and corruption and backdoor deals instead of debate and discussion and ordinary people having a say in our lives. So we're committed to elections, but they're hard work. And Peter needs 3 or 4 more people. In fact, everywhere where we make a real effort to, we are going to win seats in the next couple of years. We now know the system. They simply cannot stop us. It can be done. I guarantee you that. But also, getting out there, talking to people, giving them leaflets, getting them postal votes. It's going to bring in new people. And that's the lifeblood. That's what we really have to do. You may think, especially if you're new, well, politics isn't really for me. Perhaps it's not. And this, I want to move on to the very last thing we need to do. And we need to do this really quickly, because when the trouble really hits the fan, when whole communities of ours from the edges of places like Preston and Oldham are being burnt out of their houses, are having to flee, this is when we're going to have to really instantly pull our community together. Now, one reason we did so well in those seats up in Maryport, we rolled the system out, was we had in Dawn Charlton a great candidate who was really known by local people for doing good local things. And she's done that for years. She's been a pillar of the community, just working away for years and years and years. And we had to find a way to telescope that process so we can turn a keen would-be councillor, literally any one of you can be turned into a good future councillor by doing things for a local community. But what? What do you do? Well, we've been pushing a lot on the website. We're going to be pushing a lot more in this summer, parallel to the Preachers of Hate Out, is raising money to run local food banks. Because shockingly, in 2013, more and more and more, hundreds of thousands, millions of young British families, night after night, the parents are having to make a decision as to whether they go hungry to bed or whether the kids do. There's millions of our kids living below the poverty line in Britain right now. It's a truly shocking thing. There's huge numbers of old age pensioners who are absolutely lonely, who every single winter have to make a choice. Do they eat or do they keep the heating on? And there's large numbers of young men, like Lee Rigby would have been, once out of the army, once they've been used to fight for their country, to fight in other people's wars, they're left there and they're left to lie and sleep in cardboard boxes on the streets because someone else has been given all the houses by the local Labour Council. And those people need our help. And what we're rolling out is experimental. I really need 3 or 4 of you to get in touch after this meeting and say, yeah, I will help with that. We're rolling out an experiment whereby we've got a series of leaflets. You put them through the doors, telling people we're raising money for local community aid to help food parcels for local people who really need it. And all we need you to do, we're not asking for donations or even your time, but can you look out a bit of bric-a-brac, a few things we could sell at a car boot sale? And we'll call round and we'll collect them and we'll sell them and then we'll let you know how many people we can help. I'm the MEP for around here. I guarantee that any little group of you who get together and do that, I will give you £100 the minute you've got £50 raised, all right? And if you do something like 500, I'll kick some more in because I'm passionate about this, because the ultimate point about nationalism, it's about us. It's about us being together. It's recognising the nation as a family. And if we sit here just amongst ourselves and complain, but don't get out there and make contact with ordinary people who need our help, then they're entitled to look at us come election time and think, yeah, well, the BNP, they're a bit interesting. But in the end, they're just all another bunch of politicians. What have they ever done for me? They're all in it for themselves. And we've got to show that's not true. And if we roll this out, whereby we're collecting from a local community bits of bric-a-brac and we're selling it, and then say we raise 150 quid. Well, at a £5 a throw, that's 30 food parcels we can take and give to hard-up pensioners or hard-up young families in that little area. No one's ever done that before. No politician would do it. We will, because we're not politicians. We're the ordinary British people who've woken up and said, enough is enough. We're going to fight for our country, but we're going to do it peacefully. We're going to do it decently, but we are going to fight. And so, I really ask you from the bottom of my heart, some of you, the ones who perhaps don't want to come on the demonstration, the ones who don't want to give out political leaflets, the ones who don't want to be at the front end, the ladies especially, please get involved with these campaigns to start to build a grassroots community movement of our own people helping to make up. Okay, we can't make up for the fact that decent jobs have been destroyed in this country, that a man, and sometimes even a man and a woman, can't get decent enough jobs to rear a young family. It's not about closing that gap. It's about showing that somebody cares. It's about symbolically showing that we can do something different. And we need this network very badly, because when it hits the fan on the scale that it could next week, or will within the next couple of years. And like I say, you'll see hundreds of thousands of people moving house very rapidly, forced to move house within a space of a few weeks. You'll see people living as refugees, English people living as refugees on church hall floors because their street on the edge of Oldham, somewhere in Manchester, has been burnt to the ground because they don't feel safe there anymore, even though it has been. When that happens, and the whole ruling elite sitting there saying, oh, it's terrible, we don't know what to do, this party has to go in little groups of people, 3 and 4. You're homeless, there's a boarded up housing association house. You know what we're going to do? We're going to smash the door down and we're going to put you in that house. And then, because we've got a plumber and a painter and a decorator, we're going to get together and we're going to come in and do that house up for you. And we're going to get bits of furniture donated from a local people. And we're going to put this homeless young family in there. And then challenge the council to throw them out because it hasn't been done through the proper channels. And when people are sleeping on church halls, it's this party is going to go in and take them food parcels and take them toys for the kids and take them a few drinks through an evening or whatever and go in there to show them that we care. Because that's what's about to happen in this country, and we have to be in a position not to take advantage of it, but to do something about it and to use it to turn it. So instead of being defeated refugees, instead of being people with their heads down, people have had to run from their homes, our people understand that the fight's only just beginning. And in the end, the fight isn't against their Muslim neighbours because they're victims of this appalling system just as much as we are. We have to work with some of those people, side by side with them, trying to avoid trouble with them by concentrating on helping our own people and turning our fire politically on the people who deserve to be thrown out of office, who deserve to be in court, who deserve to be in prison, who deserve to lose every penny of the rotten money they've filched off the people of this country. And that's the political elite, the media and all the rest of them, the ruling elite of this country. They are our enemy and we know how to beat them. I've told you how to beat them. Please get involved. Do something more. Let's take this moment, this unique moment in time when our population, our country either goes down the tubes, finished, gone, surrender, or wakes up, stands up, says we're going to fight and we are going to win. Thank you.